Being central to experience is the nearest thing I can conceive as a meaning for the word I. Not an ego, because that is a social structure, a social institution, which has been kind of implanted upon our psychological behavior, upon, shall we say, experience, because experience is a thing that we are taught. We are taught what experiences are permissible and what are not, just in the same way as we are taught what speech is permissible and what is not, and what gestures are permissible, what actions are permissible and what are not. So our experience is trained, and we are trained to experience ourselves as egos. But still, underneath the implantation of the ego experience, there is this sensation of centrality. You may feel that your center is isolated, as in the ego thing, or you may feel that your center is simply the center of a being, which is you, which extends to the ultimate limits. But in every case, there is this sense of centrality in every being that exists. And therefore, every being is I, just as you are. And there are always I's in this sense. So long as the planet endures and there are living creatures on it, this is a planet which I's. And so long as there is the possibility that anywhere in the galaxies there should be such a planet or creatures who focus the centrality feeling of the universe, there is I. And that I is always you. There was a time when your I woke up. It emerged from the biological continuum and what de Chardin calls the biosphere of this planet. And you don't remember having been here before, at least not in the ordinary way. That is as surprising and as inconceivable an event as ceasing to be and without any apparent prospect of being again. But you see, after this event called life, if you go back to unconsciousness, you go back to where you were before you started. And since there can't be any experience of non-experience, obviously, any next I that comes up, and all, in fact, next I's that come up, are you. Only since I is an experience of centrality, you don't experience yourself as multi-centered. You experience yourself as a particular center, because the universe, although it is multi-centered, each center is experienced uniquely. So what you might roughly expect is this, that after you die, the next thing you know is that you are, without the slightest memory of whatever happened before, you repeat the same sort of experience as you had when you were born. As is somebody else being born. But there has to be someone around. I'm merely saying that the experience of being I goes on. Even if there's an interval of several billion years, it makes no difference whatsoever. Supposing the human race was wiped off the planet, and it took that much time for it to reappear, or any living creature, that would make no difference to this phenomenon. So, since there is no possibility of a non-experience, there are always experiences coming up, and each one of them is you, because that's its I. Now, I know there's a difficulty in this, because it arises from the fact that we identify I with ego. Part of ego is a memory system. You know who you are in the sense that you remember who you are. You identify yourself with a series of events that you remember, and these are like strung out in a line. They're like a certain tune. And therefore you identify yourself with that tune. So we repeat ourselves. We have consistent characters, just in the same way as a tune is always constructed to repeat itself in a certain way with variations, so that we recognize the tune and the name of the piece by hearing even one part of it. So here is a tune, you see, that is being played, and it is attached to a center called I. Only the I is much more than this particular tune, this particular series of memories. Even though we are persuaded and kind of hoaxed into identifying the whole I with that series of memories. But you know, supposing somebody plays a Chopin etude, and then he stops. Then later on, somebody else plays it. Is it the same tune? Why, in one sense, yes. In another sense, no. So it is possible, isn't it, that even though your tune was wiped out because the memory system goes with death, the same sort of tune can be played again with its characteristic themes, and that will be, in another sense, you, in a more particular sense than the you of centrality. In Buddhism, there has never been the idea that rebirth or reincarnation involves the transmigration of a specific soul, because all schools of Buddhism are agreed on the idea that the individual self or soul is an illusion, in Maya. And they liken the process of rebirth to the motion of a wave across the surface of water. Actually, the motion is illusory. The water simply goes up and down, and there is an optical impression of a wave moving out. No wave moves, and yet there is the seeming of movement. So the Buddhist would say, no soul reincarnates, and yet there is the illusion of reincarnation. Buddhists think of reincarnation as an illusion, and yet believe in it. Westerners think of it as something that might be a fact, and find it difficult to believe in it. Westerners adopt the idea of reincarnation as a comforting idea. Buddhists are trying to get out of being reincarnated. It's very funny. But at any rate, the Buddhist doctrine of reincarnation says that what passes from life to life is karma, is doing, action. That's what karma means. Process. And that's something like wave. Not soul, not entity. That doesn't pass. Then who are you? You are a pattern, you see. You're a process that is identifiable and recognizable. You face in a certain way. You hair in a certain way. You eye in a certain way, and you behave in a certain way. So we recognize you. But it's all inconstant. It's like a whirlpool in water. The water flows through, and the whirlpool retains a shape until it doesn't. But then it can always whirlpool again somewhere else. So now, if that's clear so far, what becomes interesting in this is that you will pick out the lines of continuity between lives. Upon what basis? Why, just in the same way as you pick out continuity between tones, by the way they interval to each other. In which case the death interval, the off interval, becomes the significant connecting factor between the on intervals. That's what you do when you look at patterns of blobs on a wall. You could play with Roland Hall's paintings that way and see all sorts of things in them. And it depends what intervals you find significant that connects what you call the on pieces. See, you always get off pieces and on pieces. You've got a kind of mosaic. Look into a press photograph with a magnifying glass, and you find a mosaic of black and white dots. And so you can make the significant connection. And as you do, you come out with somebody's face. And so in the world, our nerves are very much like the press photograph. When something impinges upon the retinal backdrop of the eye, it impinges on a whole lot of rods and cones that are either on or off. The state of a neuron, you see, is that it fires or it doesn't fire. So we've got this press photograph thing in us. If you work with LSD, this comes very clear. You get a vision sometimes of the world which is positively pointillist, like the paintings of Seurat. Somehow it seems as if your nerve ends had been activated individually, and you become aware of a grainy quality in everything. This could be dismissed as a pure hallucination, but all hallucinations have some basis in our neural structure, you see. They may not be experiences that of what we call the objective world, but in any experiment that turns your consciousness on your consciousness, your senses on your senses, you will get curious things happening, just as you might get oscillations in electric circuitry. So it would then be intervals, once again, that could be the significant connecting factors in a developmental pattern of an individual through a series of incarnations. But those intervals are illusions. The connection is illusory, but in a sense of illusion to which we Westerners are not really accustomed, because Maya means illusion in a very complex sense. It means also creative power, art, magic, calculation, in the sense of the calculus. It is difficult for us to understand, you see, the notion that the world is Maya. Why is it difficult for us to understand that? What is our feeling about saying this is a dream, a projection? What's the objection to that idea? I think that historically, at the root of our Western objection to this idea is that it's discourteous to God. It is as if to say God did not really create the world, as it says in the Bible, but that he only seemed to. But you realize that this is an absolute verbal hang-up. It's really a question of values. If the world is real, then I must take you seriously, and you must take me seriously. If the world is only a dream, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You see, if you say it doesn't matter, then you are saying it's purely spiritual. Like it's immaterial, baby. And you see how we flip around in our use of words. We say something, oh, that's mere matter. So it doesn't matter. Everybody gets completely confused in the way they think about these things, because they've never really been thought about clearly, these questions of is it real or is it not real. When an Oriental says to something that it's not real, the first thing he means is it's not permanent. And so the quality of change, of the smoke-like, and therefore they say the dream-like, because the dream vanishes, you see, and so they say life is like a dream. It keeps, as you get older, you're more and more aware of the speed at which things change. With a child, it seems to be slow. Children easily get bored. But as you get older, life is just going, especially if you live in California, where you can't keep a steady mailing list for more than 2 months, because every 2 months, a quarter of the addresses change. And, the bulldozers come in and they change the shape of everything and knock down all the old buildings and up go new ones, and then they get knocked down. Well, they're so jerry-built that they fall apart. But there it goes, you see. And so there is this quality. He means dreamlike. The thing is in constant flux. But he also means illusion in showing the extent to which what is going on in this flux is a creation of the perceiving organism. So that by illusion, the Oriental also means relative, as in the relationship between the air vibrations and the ear, between the cloud, sun, and the observer. These things produce rainbow, sound, and so on, but these are relative realities. And so when Buddhists use the word void, shunyata in Sanskrit, as designating the nature of the world, this should rather be translated relativity than nothingness. The great scholar Stravatsky made this very plain in his book on the Buddhist nirvana. It is relativity that we should think of, rather than our ideas of non-being. So from that point of view, as also from the standpoint of quantum mechanics and modern physics, the illusory nature of the world is very clear. It was so much so that one physicist who was a little daft used to go round in the most enormous padded shoes, for fear of dropping through the atomic structure of the floor. So one gets this extraordinary sense then of living in this incredibly real-seeming world, which, the more you analyze it, consists mostly of space. And you come to feel a, shall I say, diaphanous quality about things. That a mountain is only a faster wave and longer-lasting rainbow. And that, as the poet said, the hills are shadows, and they flow from form to form, and nothing stands. And if you will experience this, this kind of creepy feeling you get, when you think that this is just, that you and everything about you is just a whoosh, here and gone, and swallowed up in space. Now, why do you say swallowed up? You see, people, poets, people who talk, swallowed by the grave, swallowed into space, disappeared into nothing, gone, vanished, into thin, thin air. Why is there an objection to this? Well, one's been taught to object, because you've been taught to identify with the solid side of the picture and to disidentify with the empty side of the picture. But you've been hoaxed and fooled, because you, when you die, are not, as it were, gulped up by thin air. You're just as much the thin air as anything else. It's all of a piece. It isn't a fight going on, but everything is represented as a fight, a contest between this side and that. But this is really the whole thing about illusion. Where the ordinary person sees a battle, the enlightened person sees a cooperation between two sides. Have you ever tried to play chess with yourself and honestly take each side as you play its move against the other one? Or to get two, those swords they have in bars they stick into olives in martinis. You get two of these swords and fence with yourself, and see if you really can stick it into one of your hands and have the other one defend it. This is the most fascinating game, and this is the game God is playing, sitting there. Two hands, here's good, here's evil, here's Jesus Christ, and here's Lucifer. And he got real involved in this fight, you see. But he finds out that if he makes the right hand win all the time, there's no point in the game. He has to get into the left hand. But in order for there to be a real fight, he mustn't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing, vice versa. You see? Here explains all the stuff in the Bible. But really, you see, underneath, the two hands, they join back here, like a kind of a horseshoe, or like the snake Ouroboros, which is always after his own tail. And an aspect of that, not letting your left hand know what your right hand is doing, is the way we identify ourselves with what's inside the skin and not with what's outside it. We identify ourselves as reality with the solid things that we can see, and all the rest is space, and that's nothing, you see. We characteristically take sides in a situation where both sides are aspects of the situation. We would take this side. Will you have this or that? Choose. But the sage doesn't choose, because he said, well, there's no choice here. He might choose for the sake of going along. Like somebody says, well, what would you like to do today? We can go into town and do some marketing, or we can stay out here and go swimming. You don't care which you do, so you just say one in order to satisfy your guest, your host. So then behind the explicit battle, there is the implicit agreement. Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed to have a battle. We agree to differ if we want to have a sane social order. So cheer up. You may well be so conditioned just like to feel the fear of the unknown, even though you know much better. But what I've said here, I think, about space and about rebirth and so on, you will notice one thing about it all. Nothing that I've said, or understanding anything that I've said, doesn't require any kind of what I would call special knowledge. It's all out in front of you. Actually, it doesn't require meditation exercises or LSD or anything. It's all out in the open. And the only really essential meditation exercise is stopping thinking and being able to perceive without conceptualizing what you're looking at. And that's the interior silence, without which, well, there is really nothing to think about or talk about.